Welcome, my friends, to Rugged Outdoors Guide. My name is Pete, and I am thrilled that you can join me today. Today I am sitting on a beach on the south shore of Lake Ontario. Right across the lake, right there, I'm looking at Toronto, the skyline. I can see the CN Tower and even a bit of the, it used to be called Sky Dome, Rogers Center, whatever it's called now, where the Raptors and the Blue Jays play. Today we're talking about something that is kind of, I guess it's targeted towards those who are a bit newer in this whole paddling world. But for those of you that have been doing it forever, you can glean a few things, I'm sure. So let's get into it right now. We're talking about paddles. Which paddle is right for you, and then how to size it properly. I know this topic has been done to death, how to choose a paddle, how to size it, but you know what, not everybody knows, and there's always new people getting in to the hobby and outdoor wonderful pastime of paddling, and you gotta know stuff. I didn't know stuff when I started, so here I am to help you get started with paddles. So I have done a whole bunch of blog entries about the parts of a paddle and how to choose a paddle for you. I've also done a YouTube video on the parts of a paddle, which you might see pop up in a little notification because you'll want to know the parts of a paddle when I'm talking about what is the shoulders, for example. You know, it's helpful to know what that is. So maybe check that out at your earliest convenience. On our blog, ruggedoutdoorsguide.com, there's, again, a bunch of articles on paddles. You can just go in the search bar and type in paddles or paddle, and you'll find a whole bunch of neat stuff if you're looking to find out more about which paddle to get for your situation. Now, guys, you have to stick around to the end of this video. I've got a free giveaway, and it's worth about 30 bucks, but it's not just a free giveaway. It is 3 of them right here, and this is from one of our sponsors. It's called Sole Insole, and these are very, very unique cushioned gel insoles that are just around the middle of your foot, sort of like an arch support, but they're very cool because they stick really well in your shoes. But then once they get all gummy and grungy and gross, you can just rinse them off with water and they're good to go again. So really unique product. Stick around to the end, and I will tell you how you can get your free Sole Insole worth 30 bucks. You have to forgive me if you hear a lot of traffic. I'm not as secluded as I would like to be. I'm about 100 yards away from the QEW. It's the Queen Elizabeth Way. It's one of the bigger highways in Canada here, near Niagara Falls, St. Catharines, Hamilton, and Toronto, right across the lake. All right, so what paddle is best for you? Well, best is kind of an open-ended term, because best can mean what's the best shape, or what's the best length, or what's the best material. So really, I'm going to talk as quickly as I can about all of the above. So the first type of paddle we talk about is double blade. Now, double blade is often something that people love to have for solo canoeing, and I have used it for that. I'm not a big fan of a double blade because it does drip and it kind of gets you a little bit wet, and it's not my favorite. I like the control I have better with a single blade, but many people love the double blade. They swear by it, and it is something you can definitely look into. I would get the longest one possible. I don't have any need for short blades, especially if you're in a canoe, or short shaft lengths. If you're in a canoe, you're going to want the longest blade possible because you have, remember, you're not in a kayak, you're in a canoe, and it's got a wide beam, which is the width, and you are going to want to reach the water easiest, and that's going to be with the longest shaft. We do have a video all about a review of one of the kayak or the double-bladed paddles that I own, and you can also check that out. Maybe it'll pop up there too, who knows, or I'll have a link for it below. Another type of paddle blade shape that I'll talk about really quickly is a long, thin shape, which is called an otter tail. And this is something that a lot of classic kind of solo playboat kind of people, like Bill Mason and Becky Mason. They love to solo with this type of a paddle. It gives them good control. You're not moving a lot of water necessarily, but you can control things really well. You're moving water quickly, and I honestly, on a personal level, I haven't had any real affinity for this type of paddle. I own one, kind of, but yeah, you know what? It's not bad, but it's meant for deeper water, and I spend a lot of time in shallow water, so I tend to like a wider blade. And speaking of that, short, wide blades are favored by whitewater paddlers because you don't hit as many rocks with it, and they just seem to, just the way I feel when I'm on the water, I feel like I'm pushing more water. It just feels like it's more efficient. And anyway, I just like a shorter and wider blade. That's my personal opinion, and it's something that is also used quite often by, let's say, a bow paddler in a tandem lake tripping scenario. I happen to use it in the stern as well. That is my favorite type of paddle for sure. Another type of paddle is a bent shaft, and I know I've talked about that. I have articles about that, how to build your own. I'm a big proponent of bent shaft. It is by far the most efficient paddle, and by that I just mean the angle that it enters the water, and then as you push the water past you, the blade is perpendicular. It's up and down. It's not pushing water up or down as you can do with a straight shaft. So again, you can learn more about that with my posts on paddles and paddle shapes and all that kind of stuff. So you can learn about why the bent shaft is more efficient. But I would strongly suggest bent shaft. The only thing is it can be a little bit tricky if you are a stern paddler trying to use corrective strokes. It can be a little bit of a challenge, still quite possible and doable, but it's a little bit tougher to kind of do a J stroke or something like that, or a goon stroke with a bent shaft. A little bit harder than with a straight shaft, but no big deal. I use it all the time, especially solo canoeing. I love, love, love my bent shaft. There are other blade shapes, like a Voyageur blade, which is just, it's kind of big and long all around, but again, it's better for deeper water. And then there's the classic beaver tail shape. That's a very, very common one. Most outfitters will give their clients this shape. It's just a good, it's not too deep, it's not too shallow, it's kind of in between, and you'll see it probably more than any other kind. Again, excellent, excellent paddle for all around lake water paddling. There are other issues you'll want to be aware of, like, for example, what type of comfort level do you want in a paddle? Like, if you grab the shaft of a paddle, is it round? Is it oval? But is it oval in the right way that fits your hand the way it's shaped when you're paddling? You got to make sure of this. So it's best to check it out in a retailer's store if you can. But if you buy it online, stick with some of the better names like Bending Branches and Gray Owl and such. So these companies know to build the paddle so that the shape of the shaft, especially near the blade itself at the neck, it just fits your hand with the right ergonomics, and it's not kind of oval shaped in the wrong way. Trust me, I've had so many junky paddles in my life, and the cheaper you go, the less comfortable they are, and around just the way you grab the shaft. You will not want it for a long trip. Trust me, you'll hate paddling if you get a cheap like $15 paddle. Don't do it. It's my biggest advice. You want to be concerned about the balance of it as well. If you get a really cheap paddle made out of plastic or something, you will inevitably have just a bad experience with the balance of it. When you grab it near the blade itself, the blade will kind of be heavier than the rest of the shaft, and it's just annoying and it's tiring. So make sure you can kind of get an instinctive feel for it. And if you stick with some of the higher end names that I've just mentioned, you will not be disappointed. Trust me on that. So there are other features that you'll want to be concerned about as well, like, for example, do you want to paddle with a resin tip on it? Right along the bottom of the paddle, it'll have like a plastic hard epoxy, and that is excellent to ward off premature wear and tear, but it can cost a little bit more. Same with the aesthetics of it. You know how some paddles just look like a work of art? You don't even want to stick it in the water. Well, I don't know, is that important to you? It's not that important to me, actually. In fact, I like to have one that's maybe not quite as good looking so I don't feel so bad when I beat it up on the rocks. Some paddles will have, at least the blade part will have like a fiberglass wrap on it, which makes it way sturdier and it lasts longer, but it's also heavier. So things to consider when you're looking for a paddle. All right, the next thing you want to be really careful about is what material you want the paddle to be made out of. Like, is it wood? Like this one right here? That's probably what most are made out of, but there's so many other materials, like, for example, carbon, which is way stronger than wood and way lighter, but way more expensive. You can get aluminum, which is pretty cheap. Usually they have like a plastic blade on it, and they're super cheap, but they're really annoying to use for long trips. You can get plastic paddles. You can also get a combination. For example, you can get like a wood shaft and a carbon blade. And those are good options too. A little bit less expensive than carbon, but still light, strong, and efficient. So the next thing you want to consider is the grip itself, where we're at the top of the paddle. How do you want your the top hand to feel for a week-long canoe trip? It makes a difference what you're grabbing. There's all kinds of different options, and a lot of people don't think about that at all when they're buying a paddle. So for example, there's the classic symmetrical palm grip, which is just sort of a flattened kind of end that doesn't fit your hand really, really well ergonomically, but it's easy to flip around one way and the other. You can paddle either way, and your fingers don't curl around like a fist. So it's, you know, your fingers are kind of straight down, and so I don't think it's that comfortable. I don't really like it on a personal level, so, you know, but it is beloved by many, and it's a very, very common grip style. Another style is a T grip, or a T handle, and that's the one I kind of like because it allows you to grab it kind of like you get a good grip on it, like you're grabbing a pole or something like that. You can make a fist, and it just feels better. That's my opinion, totally subjective, but it is an option. Another option, of course, is the asymmetrical grip, and an asymmetrical grip is often used, well, really almost exclusively on a bent shaft paddle, which is only meant to be paddled one way, and so the grip is meant to be held one way. So it's probably the ultimate in comfort because it's designed ergonomically to fit your hand grip in one direction. It's not a multi-directional one, so I like it the best. It's kind of a toss-up between T-grip and asymmetrical, but all of my straight shafts that I use on a regular basis are T-grip, and then my bent shaft is the asymmetrical grip. Now I just want to get into size for a bit. You guys, some of you might be wondering how to find the right length shaft. Now I just want to say that I'll tell you how in a second, but you really have to take it with a grain of salt because every vessel that you're sitting in, every canoe will kind of require a different length, ideally. For example, I grew up with a Grumman aluminum canoe. That thing was a beast. It's not efficient at all in the water, but boy, could it take a beating. And I sat in the bow. And if you know anything about that canoe, you'll know that it's a pretty wide canoe. And sitting in the bow, it's pretty wide. So not only is it wide though, but the seats themselves are really close to the level of the gunnels. They're up pretty high. What does that mean? It means that your butt, and therefore your whole body, is a maximum distance from the water, which means your paddle is going to have to be pretty long. I had a paddle that is technically way too long for me, and I used it for about 15 years with that canoe, and it was perfect. So the rules don't always work all the time. Conversely, if you're sitting in a solo canoe with narrow gunnels and a seat that is several inches below the gunnel height, well, your butt's almost in the water as far as height is concerned. You're going to need a shorter paddle than the official rules say. But as far as length goes, I'll tell you the official rules that most people kind of go by. And right here, this part where the blade connects to the shaft, that's the neck, but these parts right here where it starts to flare, that's called the shoulders. And if you sit, this is kind of awkward because I'm in a little tiny beach chair, but if I was sitting on a straight, sturdy chair and I put this kind of right here between my legs, kind of right where my crotch is here, right on the chair, technically, the shoulders should kind of be right around my forehead. And this one, my butt is sagging a little too much, so this one actually does work. If you bring this to where my butt is actually sitting, it's right about there. And so that is right around my forehead. And the only other rule would be if you have a bent shaft, obviously this is not, you'll want to have the shoulders closer to around your eyes or even your nose, right? So it's going to be a little bit shorter for best efficiency. All right, so remember, that's just a guideline. Ultimately, the canoe that you're paddling is going to have a whole lot to say about the length of the paddle you're going to want to use. All right, and so the other thing I've got to mention is this guy right here. This is one of these emergency paddles. I've got it extended to its fullest length. It's kind of annoying to paddle. It's too short. The blade is way too small, but it can be the difference between either life and death or probably a whole lot of money. If you have to have a rescue team come out and get you, this can save that. All right, so I pack this along on every trip. Never had to use it, but it's a non-negotiable. Even though I'm psycho about weight, I'll take the weight of this. Okay, so you guys see, I just brought one paddle to talk about here today. I didn't want to haul all my paddles out here to the lake. Just a quick story you guys might be interested in. It's kind of a sad story, but it's okay. My father passed away about 15 years ago, and he was an avid outdoorsman. In fact, he died doing what he loved the most. He was actually putting that old Grumman canoe I just told you about on top of a full-sized van, and he was 77 years old. Strong guy. And he got it on top of the van, but he had to use a step ladder, a small one. It was a short one, but no one really saw what happened. But Mom found him lying on his back on the driveway. He had hit his head. He had obviously taken a misstep off the ladder. So it just goes to show you can't be too careful. Be careful, please, even when you're doing something as simple as putting the canoe on your vehicle. But the reason I tell you that story is that Dad was a prolific paddle maker, and he was in the midst of making 2 or 3 paddles at the time of his death, and I was able to gather those up, and this was one of them. He had done the design, and he had made the blade. The only thing he didn't do is the grip, so I was able to make this T-grip on here, and then of course I finished sanding it and just putting like a spar varnish on it. And so that's why I've got this one here today. And by the way, this is a classic beaver tail style. It is shorter than the average paddle because I do a lot of soloing, and Dad did as well, and so he understood the value of having it a little bit shorter instead of this awkwardly long paddles. All right, I told you that if you stuck around to the end of this video, you would find out how to get your free set of sole-insole inserts. I'm going to do a random draw for 3 of them. I actually have another one to give away. It is also from Sole Insole, but what it is a set of heel lifts, and for those I need you to tell me why you want a set of heel lifts, or you can tell me all about your paddle, how you sized it, how you made it, or did you get one at a store, did you make your own, how does it work, what kind of paddle do you have, or paddles. Give me a comment and I will send you, again, it'll be a random draw of the people who did that, and I will send you a pair of heel lifts. All right, and as I said earlier, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment, and the more creative you get, the more you're likely to get my heel lifts that I told you about. And I'm looking forward to doing the random draw for all 3 of these Sole Insole gel inserts. They really are premium insole inserts. I don't use anything else really in any of my shoes at this point. But keep in mind, all I have is 2 size larges and 1 small. And the larges are, I've got a note here, men size 10.5 to 14, or women size 11.5 and up. That's the large. And then the small is men size 5 to 7.5 and women size 6 to 8.5. So let me know which one you prefer, although no guarantees. They might be gone by the time I draw your name. Don't know. But anyways, let me know your preference and I'll do my best to accommodate. All right, guys, thanks for joining me today. That's all I have for you for now. I do appreciate you taking the time out of your day, a little portion of it, just to see what I have to say. Hopefully, maybe I can save you some time and frustration and maybe some money in terms of buying a paddle that is best for you. So guys, you know what I'm going to say, right? Until the next time that you see me, and until the next video, get out there, guys. Enjoy God's creation and keep on looking up.